What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Courage to Grow show with Jeff and Joe. Yes, we like to rhyme to start the day off. It's a happy, fun Friday for us here, and we are excited to talk with our very special guest today. She's been working with us in the SOS Dojo for a good while now, I think. Well, I'll ask you how much in a second when I say your name, but I've also known her for a long time because I worked with her with a previous mentorship organization that I was at. So it's really awesome and special to have her here today. Shannon Logan, how are you doing today?
Morning or good afternoon, whenever everyone's listening to this. I'm doing fantastic, gentlemen. I am honored to be here today. That's to say the least.
The honor is
Awesome.
ours. So happy to have you here, Shannon.
I,
It's
th-
great.
I think we're going to have some good stories, some good conversation today. As always, I got my co-host here, Joe Marcoux. Joe, how we doing?
You know what? You probably hear to my voice. My voice is a little bit off. In the last couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements, which is terrific. And so how I'm doing fantastic. I'm on cloud 10, let alone cloud 9. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak to a large group of people in a mentorship program from Fit Body Bootcamp, and it went super well, and they've already invited me back, and there's people that are emailing me wanting to connect and learn more. And so yeah, just the power of hydration. So yeah, I'm
Love
doing
it.
great.
Awesome. All right. So, Shannon, if you could, for the guests, the listeners here, explain in maybe 15 seconds or less, we'll see how close you can keep it to that timestamp, who you are and what you do.
My goodness, 15 seconds. Yes. Shannon Logan, I'm an entrepreneur. I own a brick and mortar health and fitness company in Annapolis, TrueCore. We are CrossFit based, but we also do a ton of personal training, one-on-one, small group nutrition. We've really transferred to a holistic approach in the last 2 years, which we've seen change the lives of our clients and change the life of our staff. My biggest purpose I find in life is to empower people to have the courage to reach their best life, their best potential, and their happiest self.
Love it.
Was
That's
that, Jeff?
awesome. It
Awesome.
was pretty close to 15 seconds. I'll
Okay.
give you that. And it was very
All right, cool.
clear. So the clarity is necessary for all business owners out there. Nobody is immune to that. So I love that you've got that clarity in your business. Now, the way we like to kick the show off is kind of like, let's go back in time together. Let's time travel a little bit. You know, we can do the Wayne's World, doodaloo, 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 and let's go way, way back, right? I want to hear from the start of your entrepreneurial journey. We like to call it the rough start, the rough patch, if you will, right? Share a little bit of a story, you know, as I mean, it could be a big story if you want to, but like share a little story about that rough start. What was something rough that happened to you early on in this journey?
Absolutely. So, as we start off, just a heads up, and I love what your podcast is called, Courage to Grow. So something that I've been kind of working through my own courage on in my own life, and especially in sales, is the fact that I have a speech impediment. I have a stutter, and as you can see, it comes up when I get anxious. And so it's been something that I spent a lot of my life kind of avoiding. And then as I kind of come in more and more into my own authenticity and security with self, as I ask my clients to do, I'm kind of talking about it a little bit more, embracing it a little bit more, and not trying to hide it as much. So I only bring it up now because I'm a little anxious on this podcast. I'm not gonna lie. You are mentors to me, to say the least. So I want people out there, when they tune into this, if they hear it, not to have to wonder back and forth what the hell is wrong with her. Is she really scared, or what's happening? So just a little background on that. Um, Going back to my entrepreneur journey, yeah. So I opened TrueCore in December of 2014, and I had been in the fitness industry a long time before that. And so I am a little bit of a people pleaser in terms of I want everyone to be happy. And as a business owner, it can be really challenging to find a way to support yourself while keeping all your clients happy all the time. And I had some struggles with realizing how impossible that actually is, unrealistic it is, and how unfair it is to both myself and to my staff. And how we had to kind of early on, I would say probably within the first 5 years, identify what our core mission was, what our core vision is, what our values are, and then use those to run our decisions by, instead of how happy is this going to make people, right? And appealing to the masses can be very hard, because the more people you have, the more personalities you have.
Mm.
Some might say the more problems you have. So, as an early entrepreneur, it was coming to that realization of, hey, I'm not going to be able to please everyone, and that's okay. And I may not be the best fit for everyone, and that's okay. Why do I do this? Why does it wake me up at night with passion, not just stress, but with passion? And how can I make sure that I'm staying in line with that and true to that, so that I feel inspired when I wake up to go to work each day?
I love that. And I feel it's something that everybody should be able to relate to. Like as entrepreneurs, we always have or should always have this passion about what it is that we're doing. And at the same time, if you're in the business that we're in, the business of service, then typically you care about the relationships that you're developing, good and bad, right? Like you don't want to have that bad impression on someone, and you can have that like vocal smaller group that just keeps chirping. They're like, we need more classes, for example, at like a CrossFit gym. They're gonna be like, I need a 5 a.m. And you're like, man, I don't have a coach for that time. I don't really want to do that time. There's how many people are, this is the question I always ask business owners when they come to me and they're like, what do I do? My clients want a 5 a.m. class. And I'm like, cool. How many clients want that? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Because they'll say, like, you'll get that one person to come up to you and be like, "Hey, I just want you to know, Shannon, everybody wants a 5 a.m." And you're like, "Really? Everybody? Can you name everybody?" And they'll have no names to give you because it's really just them. And part of the problem with people pleasing is if you're that people pleaser, in that moment, you'll be like, "Oh, everybody wants 5 a.m. Hey guys, hey team, we got to add a 5 a.m. Who wants to coach it?" And then you start it. And I've done this probably half a dozen times. You start this new class and one person friggin' shows up, and the next week one person shows up, and then the next week they're on vacation, nobody shows up. And you're like,
Right.
okay, I've made a grave error.
Oh
i
my
i
goodness.
think we've all been in that
Yeah.
position. I know you've definitely experienced that. Joe, have you had that?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Countless times. Even in the dojo, we've had people say, "Hey, I'd love to be able to have a class at this particular time." So, and this is when I started doing the online dojo.
Yep.
I
Early on.
accommodated.
Yep.
So I understand how the whole idea of being a people pleaser. Shannon, let's face it. I mean, when there's a level of codependency, and it's hard for us as entrepreneurs to admit some of our challenges. And I want to recognize, I wrote a note, first of all, I want to recognize the fact that, to be vulnerable is part of the relationship process, to be able to let people know that, hey, this is who I am with all of my warts and my, hair loss and everything else that goes with it. And the fact that you had mentioned earlier on that you have this challenge, which you mentioned was a stutter, this is the crazy part. I forgot that you were even dealing with it. I remember when we first met, this was something that you wanted to deal with. You were dealing with it so well. And there's something that I want to mention it to you. And I've already said this to you, and I'm putting this out there here on the podcast. There was something that I saw in you when we first met. And I said, like, and you also said, I want to be a black belt. And I was like, to me, it was like, it's not even a want. I already know that you're a black belt. Like, you're already there. It's just now a question of the time, right? Now it's just time collapsing the process. So one of those things that's so powerful is for the recognizing of, okay, I have this challenge or this imperfection, because we all do, we're human. And being able to recognize it and putting it out there really takes it down. It's not, you're not amplifying it, you're just shedding light on it, and it's like, okay, and people are accepting you for it. And I think in terms of your clients, and for Jeff and I as your mentors, I can tell you right now, we love you for it. It's such a quality that more people, if the listener, that's a quality that's, it's so powerful. And I just wanted to recognize you for that.
Well,
And
thanks, Joe.
yeah, just to add on top of that, something I was going to mention after you had opened up about that, and again, thank you for being vulnerable about it on the show. I can tell when you're in a confident state because you're so solid. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can always,
Yeah.
I'm like, Shannon is on point right now. She
Yep.
can feel the good vibes and she's got the confidence. And for transparency to everybody, like one of our missions here, well, our mission here, the SOS Dojo is that we want to be the number one producer of confident communicators in the world. And when you communicate confidently, like when somebody is communicating in a confident way, you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can tell. We talk about um, vibes, for example, right? Somebody is exuding these positive vibes. It's really just like that confidence, man. Like they're just feeling really good about what it is that they're saying. And that's always like a litmus test as a consumer for you to tell if somebody's full of shit or not, right? If I'm
100%.
talking to a
Yep.
salesperson, I immediately can tell if they're bullshitting me or if they're straight shooting me, right? So that is something that I always try to keep in mind. And if you're a coach out there, if you're a business owner out there and like you're not feeling confident when you communicate, and make no mistake, a sales call is the communication we're talking about, or a buying conversation as we like to think of it as instead.
Mm-hmm.
Any of those relationship building moments in the gym. So once they sign up, you're establishing contact with this with a personal touch point with your clients. That's all communication. And if you don't do it confidently, that's the fastest way to burn a bridge with somebody. The
Yeah.
fastest way to shake that level of trust where they no longer have that faith in you. So I can tell when you're super confident. And if you're going into your sales calls like that, like then you're crushing it. And I know
Yep.
that you do crush it. So I mean,
It
I love that.
it's that piece of we've talked about this before. People will they'll call their sales conversations perfect consultations. And what do we just talk about? We talked about the fact that we're imperfect. Nobody's perfect. So for us, the PC needs to be, we need to throw it on its head and call it a BC. It's a buying conversation.
Mm,
Nobody likes to be sold. I mean,
yeah.
Shannon, you were just recently in Mexico. Did you bump into anybody at all that's trying to sell you something? And it's like, no, no. Or have you ever had somebody in your life at any time where somebody's just trying to sell you something? How does that make you feel?
Right.
Right.
So great. Yeah, for
And
sure.
so if we could flip it and so how can we expect people to go and sell if they themselves don't like being sold? So instead of trying to sell, stop selling. Let's go into this with the intention of I'm going to create rapport and build up a buying conversation where somebody's just going to be compelled to want to say, yes, I'm on board with what you're offering. So it leads to the question, Shannon, because confidence was something that we were talking about, and you're going into these buying conversations. What are you doing right now to help build yourself up, as far as like what are some of the habits that you're doing to help build yourself up as far as your confidence and your conviction?
Yes. So there's a couple things. I have like a pre-call checklist that
Mm-hmm.
I've been taught to have through SOS. Rusty did a great job in kind of walking us through what that should look like. So I actually have that checklist before I sit down for a sales call. That's more action items, right? Like prepping, make sure my mic's plugged in. I have testimonials up. I have my PC script, that kind of stuff. But from a confidence standpoint, because I am human and I have
Mm-hmm.
hot streaks, and I may not have as hot streaks, that I can have some of that self doubt of, how am I going to do this? Am I going to be able to have a constructive conversation with someone where they want to take action at the end of it? It's really good for me to go back and to review success stories. So clients that I had that have done really well, but also ones that at first on our conversation, on our consult, may have been scared. And through that conversation I had with them, they ended up signing up. Now, 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years down the road, their entire lives have changed. So, Joe, I think what's important that you bring up from a buying conversation standpoint is authenticity, right? Like, I am, when I am being authentic, I am my best self. I spent a lot of my life trying to be what I thought everyone else wanted me to be, have a perfect front, right? And created uncomfortability, and it created anxiety, and it created a lot of fear. And even now, like, I'm more authentic, but I still have places that I can grow in that, like we just spoke about one.
Mm-hmm.
So to help me build in confidence, I go back to those times where I might have been fearful to be my authentic self, and this conversation, when it comes to sales specifically, and look like, okay, you had this conversation with this person where you came from a help first mentality, you heard what they had to say, you prescribed for them what the best option to have the best impact on their life was. They took it, or you might have downgraded or whatever, but somehow they took action that day. And look at how it's changed not only their gym life, but their home life, their work life, their kids' lives. All right, let's get excited to do this with the next person that we talk to. Um, and also, from a confidence standpoint, I go back to hard cold fact as well, because I do have self doubt, especially if I get in a cold spell. Like, oh my goodness, is the bottom going to fall out of this? Is the shoe going to drop? I go back and look at metrics, not just from this month, but from this quarter compared to last year at this time,
That's great.
right? Like my brain can spin a lot of negativity about fear. And so, what did this month look like compared to this month last year? What did this quarter look like compared to last quarter, like last year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we're not, the sky's not falling, Chicken Little. This is actually normal, or oftentimes you're ahead of where you were at this time last year. So have some confidence, have some faith in yourself, have some faith in what you've been taught, come from authenticity, keep walking it out.
Nice.
Love it. Yeah, authenticity is something that, obviously it comes up a lot with sales because there are unfortunately a lot of people out there that are completely inauthentic. And one way that I describe it for people, especially if they're getting into entrepreneurship, they want to start a business, is I always like implore them to not just chase money for the sake of it being money. If you want to make money, there's 1,000 side hustles you can get into cryptocurrency or whatever. Like you're going to deal with a lot of ups and downs, and you're going to piss off a lot of people because you're in there for the wrong reasons. If instead you chase your passion and you put a lot of care and love into what it is that you do, then you will come off authentic. People will recognize that. People can smell bullshit, like I've said before, like, and they will find out that you are full of it if you're in this for the wrong reasons. So if I start a business, let's say I start a gym, and I'm like, oh, I just want to have 3,000 members paying $20 a month, and I don't really care about any of them. And like, if they show up, sweet, and if they don't, sweet. So that's a problematic behavior, and
Mm-hmm.
it creates, it's like a breeding ground for
Mm-hmm.
this, very negative environment that you're putting everybody into. And that's where you start hearing the horror stories. And I've worked for these companies before, and that's why I don't work there anymore. But I've worked for these companies where we just, our goal is just sign up hundreds of people a month, and we're targeting like apartment complexes and things like that. Not that there's
Mm-hmm.
necessarily anything wrong with getting leads from apartment complexes, but the way we did it was very wrong. Where you're going to them and you're saying like, oh, you've won an opportunity to go on a cruise or something like that. All we need is your information, and that's how we like snag them leads. And then once we have them leads, we bring them in and we say, oh, too bad you didn't win, but second prize is a gym membership for 2 years, and then all you got to do is pay an $8 a month maintenance fee. Like that is a scam born out of
Mm.
inauthentic behaviors, right? Like that, those gym owners they never worked out at their gym. By the way, the owners of this company never a day worked out at their gyms. I don't think they worked out at all. So they were not here to
Nice.
create a healthier,
Yeah.
better environment in that city that I was working in. They were purely there to make straight cash, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is a problematic behavior for sure, right? So yeah, let's dive into, before we kind of like wrap this thing up. We like to talk about sales fails for a second, if we can. So if possible, can you recall like a sales scenario, right, or a conversation that you've had in the past that didn't go as planned, right? If you care to share that.
Oh my goodness, just one of them?
Yeah,
Um,
well, just one to start, sure, yeah.
jeez. Um, you know, I, I don't have one specifically that pops in my head. I think that the overall thought that comes is that I had so many sales fails because I would be handed one objection, which is pretty normal. Like, how often does someone buy immediately? And I wouldn't know what to do. I'd be like, okay, yeah, if you need to go home and think about it, I understand you need to talk to your spouse. You're shopping
The
around,
people
you
pleaser
know?
came out.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it was always harder to kind of figure out how to manage those objections in a way that felt authentic, didn't feel sleazy, because I
Mm,
wanted them to purchase then, because as we all know, if someone walks out or gets off the call,
right.
probably not going to come back. Unfortunately, I've known those people that don't come back for 2, 3 years, and then sometimes they wander back in and they're so much further off down the hole than they were, you know. Um, they've wasted all that time and they're more unhappy. So the sale fail for me really is like that deer in the headlights. Oh my God, it's an objection. How do I how do
Yeah.
I handle this and still be kind and authentic and not sleazy and please the person? Because I was, battling with people pleasing, like Joe mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the big thing that comes to my head when you're like, what's a major sales fail or store that you had?
Yeah, just kind of we call it the sympathy trap or falling for the objection is another
Oh,
example.
Yeah.
Because it's not always about a sympathetic behavior where somebody says like, "Oh man, I would totally start this, but my mom died last week." And like, what are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do about that scenario? It's such an awkward position that you've been put into. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily intentional. I'm not saying this person has a malicious intent. It could be completely 100% honest. Like that actually happened. And sometimes that's the case. More likely what we often hear is like, oh man, I got a no fender bender yesterday, so like I've got to cover that cost first, and then I'll tell you what, I'll come back next Friday after my insurance
Mm-hmm.
covers this, blah 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 blah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is like it's normal for an empathetic human being to start feeling for this person, but to slide from a state of empathy to sympathy. And with sympathy, you're feeling it like with them
yeah.
and agreeing with the emotion or state that they're in, right? Versus empathy, I can interpret and understand how you might be feeling, and at the same time, want the best for you still. Like, and if the
Mm-hmm.
best for you truly is the service that I'm offering, like, why are we putting this off? A good example would be I've had people, the fender bender example, right? Where this is something they absolutely have to do. Like when I was running my gym, doing personal training, I had a lady come in. She absolutely needed personal training, like more than anything. And when it came down to the cost, obviously there was an objection because that's a standard practice. That's normal for human behavior to have some objections. So we started talking through it, and then she brought up the fender bender thing, right? And I did my best to like kind of go back, like, hey, remember why we're here, do a little bit of recap and talk to her about how she'd been putting this off already for over a decade, right? Because I mean, anybody who's worked in fitness has heard this before. Like, when's the last time like you were happy with how you felt, right? A decade, 2 decades, sometimes maybe three. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
High
So
school.
are we going to continue in this state of unhappiness and poor health, which could be, getting more complicated as time goes on over a fender bender? We're just going to keep putting this off. And then the mentality for them is like, oh, well, I mean, I've put it off for 30 years. What's a week? You know? And that's kind of the problem that I ran into with this lady. And ultimately, I couldn't make that sale where she walks based on a fender bender that's ultimately going to cost her a deductible of $500. It's
Mm.
like, okay, I kind of get it, but at the same time, that these are two different, completely separate issues. Like, sure, you had the thing happen. Stuff happens all the time. Why are we putting off this much more important thing in your life? I mean, it's your health, it's your well being. Like, we're just
Yeah.
gonna, whatever. I need a new bumper. Way more important than me surviving another decade. Like, that doesn't make sense. But I fall for that sympathy trap. Joe, have you had that happen
Oh
one
yeah.
time that you
Oh
can
yeah.
recall?
I've had it happen recently, and it was a woman who her mother had an accident on an airplane, and
Mhm.
she needed she needed my help. I let her go, and I realized it after the fact, and it was like, Joe, snap out of it. even if she has to help her mom and there's going to be medical bills and her business is not doing well, the answer was, hey, you know what? You need me now
Yeah.
more than ever, as opposed to, well, go ahead. And guess what? I've been following up, complete ghosting.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
so it leads to this because I know that you've got a call that you need to get onto, Shannon, in a few minutes. Where do you see the future now as you've been doing this work and you've been working on yourself and you're in the
Mhm.
fitness industry? So I asked this recently to a group of fitness professionals. What's the most important set in at TrueCore? What's the most important set?
Most important set, like an exercise set, you mean? Like if I'm going to do
Sure.
a 3 by 10, for
Well,
example?
well, yeah, or just overall, when somebody walks into TrueCore,
Mhm.
my guess would be based on what you're learning, and it's a trick question. The most important set is your mindset. It's your mindset. And when your mindset and your heart set are aligned, and alignment is one of the first of our five values at the SOS Dojo. One of our things, you may have heard this before. If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. That's one of
Mhm.
our values. So I'll put you on the spot. What would be one of the things that you're working on as far as your buying conversation mindset? And where do you see TrueCore going in the future because of that?
Absolutely. So, our 2 top values ourself, because we have 5 of them, are
Mm-hmm.
honesty and trust.
Love it.
Honesty and trust, okay? And that's big for me as a person because I've had both of those things broken more than
Mm.
once. But I think it's really big as a business, and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
extremely important when you're having conversations, buying conversations, especially the ones we have nowadays because 'cause they're very personal. And
Love it.
so, our environment, I give the analogy of Cheers, that show back in the day where
Yeah.
everybody knows your name, because I want my clients to walk in and have everybody know their name and have them feel supported and accepted for exactly who they are today, but encouraged to get to where who they want to be. So that happens right on day one from the first, whether it's a text, call, email, however they get into our pipeline where we have that consult, sit down with them.
Mm-hmm.
Is I'm focused on here's me, here's who I am, here's what I do, here's my real self. I struggle with stuff. If you'll let me, I would love to learn how I can help you get through these things that you struggle with so you can feel like a better version of you.
That's great.
Love it. All right. Well, that's a great place to close out. What do you
You
guys
bet.
say? I mean, I
Awesome.
think we covered a lot.
Thank you, Shannon.
My pleasure,
Uh,
sir.
yeah, absolutely. It was awesome having you on here, Shannon. And yeah, if anybody was looking to, I don't know, maybe ask you some questions, communicate with you, just follow you and kind of see what you're up to, where would they find you?
They can find me on the good old Book of Face, Shannon Logan. They can also find me on Instagram, Coach Shannon underscore TC. If they want to email me, you're more than welcome to. Shannon at truecorecoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you being on here on the show, Courage to Grow with Jeff and Joe. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get so sick of rhyming that, I'm going to be honest. But we'll roll with it
You
for
put a
now.
wrap to it.
Appreciate everybody listening. Make sure you guys are subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast. We also post these videos on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel there on YouTube, please do that as well. Smash that like button and ring that notification bell and all that cool stuff. Anyways, that's it for us today. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Chaz, take us out.